Thanks for joining us on the show, diving headfirst into all things people, power, and politics. This, my friends, is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Since a gunman shot and killed conservative activist Charlie Kirk, one of the big conversations has been how to cool the political rhetoric down and stop violent speech. And while you might think, well, sure, we have to tone things down on social media, you're right, but it goes deeper than that, and to a platform you may have never heard of. We're examining the world of gaming and the conversations that often devolve from there. The very bullet casings the accused shooter used to shoot Charlie Kirk were riddled with references. We're taking a deep dive. Malachi Barrett with Bridge Detroit is in Studio C talking about some of those platforms. And Troy Mayor Ethan Baker and Karen Dumas with the No BS News Hour on how we must turn down the heat. The responsibility isn't one group's problem. It's all of ours. And we're talking business with Mark Lee. The businessman and entrepreneur is breaking down the latest jobs and economic report, how a slowing job market, high consumer anxiety, and inflation concerns are impacting businesses here at home. But we begin with the assassination of Charlie Kirk tonight, because this man, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, is formally charged with the shooting and made his first court appearance today. Now, these are some of the 7 charges Robinson faces in the case: aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm causing serious injury, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. Now, they say the witness tampering charge comes from the texts he sent to his roommate, including telling him to delete texts he sent after, where prosecutors say he implicated himself. They also say he talked to his parents after the shooting.
Robinson's father spoke on the phone with Robinson. Robinson implied that he planned to take his own life. Robinson's parents were able to convince him to meet at their home. As they discussed the situation, Robinson implied that he was the shooter and stated that he couldn't go to jail and just wanted to end it. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained there is too much evil and the guy, referring to Charlie Kirk, spreads too much hate.
Prosecutors said they'll seek the death penalty against Robinson if he's convicted. They wouldn't say if Robinson targeted Kirk for his anti-transgender views per se, and haven't revealed a clearer motive than what you just heard. When Kirk was shot, he was taking a question touching on mass shootings, gun violence, and transgender people. This is a story we've been on top of it since it broke, and our conversation will continue. If you want to see our continuing coverage, just go to fox2detroit.com, where you'll find a full list of all of the stories that we've done on this so far. Like we said off the top, a big focus has been how to turn down the political temperature, and a big focus has been on the traditional social media platforms. Think Facebook and Twitter, now known as X. But there are other places, sometimes, where the limelight doesn't shine as brightly, that aren't getting the same attention, and those can reportedly be a hotbed for hate speech. Malachi Barrett with Bridge Detroit is taking a closer look at this and joins us now in Studio C with a look. And Malachi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
My pleasure.
I want to begin by talking about this whole culture of gaming and the dark web. I know that you and I were talking, and I saw so many people on social media who said, you know what, traditional legacy media probably won't be talking about the conversations that are happening in these gaming chats. Kind of lift the curtain for us. What are we talking about here?
I think a lot of this stems from the messages that were inscribed on the bullets in the magazines that the shooter allegedly used in this shooting. And I think there was some concern amongst myself and other folks that some of those messages might be misinterpreted in their intent. There's been a lot of effort to ascribe this shooting to the left in a particular political ideology. I think it's very early to really determine what the motivations are, although we have some hints. But what's really notable to me in this shooting, and we've seen it with other shootings in the past, is how there was a mix of online pop culture meme language being used to incite, to troll. I think part of the shooter's intent in writing these messages was to get the prosecutors and the law enforcement agents to say these messages on TV. He mentioned in the text messages that if Fox News would have said, there was a well-known meme about noticing a bulge that's associated with the furry community. It's kind of difficult to untangle, but he was basically wanted people to say this for kind of a laugh, right?
Well, and just to give you an idea, there's basically, you say the furry community that this person apparently was a part of, and they said something about OWO, what's this? And that was linked to the furry community known for role-playing using animal avatars. So
it's more complicated than that.
Right?
Yeah, it's not even necessarily the furry community, and this is why it's difficult to ascribe motives. There's a irony among people on the far right to make fun of some of the people in the furry community. And so this is kind of a meme among the far right of the noticing the bulge. Maybe it's not worth explaining more than that.
But the point is that there are some kind of alternative cultural things that are going on.
There's a whole lexicon and a language that people are using in chat rooms, organized on places like Discord, which I don't think is an inherently dangerous platform. It's basically a chat room where people can organize different forums that are kind of privatized in server networks. But that's where a lot of these underground conversations are happening, while people, young people who have a lot of time on their hands are associating with each other.
But let's talk for a moment about this, because first of all, we know that Kash Patel, the FBI director, said that he's looking at facts, not necessarily trying to read into them. And he believes that the facts show that this person did have leftist, what he called extreme leftist ideology, according to the FBI director. But he also talked a little bit about what you're mentioning here. There was on one of the bullet casings something that was said catch, and it had an arrow going up and then 3 arrows going down on the bullet. These arrows associated with actions that happen to do with dropping bombs on enemies in a game called Helldiver 2. That's an actual game, and there's in that fascists versus enemies, right? There's other games out there that have been linked to similar things where they're trying to talk about real world things, but they're linking it in this way. This is an entire world that, as you say, is hard to unpack in just a few minutes. Yeah,
the Bella Ciao song that was also referenced is a popular anti-fascist song of the past, but also is associated with the video game Far Cry 6. And I think what you're seeing is this kind of blending and reappropriation of different memes and signals and icons in pop culture for different meanings. I mean, we've seen going back to 2015, 2016, the online kind of Gamergate conversation that was happening that really radicalized a lot of leading figures among the far right. Now they got their start talking about video game culture. So I think there's a through line that goes back a long time there. But this person was 22 years old. So I mean, it's having an effect on young people now too.
I find it interesting that you say that, because when you talk about, far left, far right, when it comes to the gaming community, you'll find everybody there. In fact, there was ethno-nationalist games that were talked about years ago that actually had ethnic cleansing as a theme: white people versus immigrants, straight people versus gay people. This was stuff on these far right gaming platforms, and now we're talking about perhaps some far left. But this is a world that maybe most people on the other side of that camera aren't even aware of, and just kind of scratching the surface now.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize too that a lot of this is the culture of violence online is basically inescapable right now. I mean, between the mass shootings that we see on an almost daily basis, the images that we've seen out of Gaza, there's Luigi Mangione has become somewhat of a folk hero for taking violence into his own hands to solve, what seems like a broader societal problem. And I think in this case too, we've seen folks cheering, this idea that there's a kind of caustic nihilism among young people and I think it goes beyond partisan identity too, because these young folks do not identify with being Republican or Democrat the same way older generations do.
Yeah, and I also find it interesting that this whole first-person shooting game, they're emulating, some of them are in this case. I mean, there have been terror shootings in New Zealand, Germany, Norway, Buffalo in the last 5 to 6 years, in which people basically kind of get used to this. It's a $300 billion market, this video game market, right? And then you have this video game market, but then you also have people emulating perhaps first-person shooting. And some people, including some psychotherapists I've talked to, say it could be dehumanizing people by saying, I can just take this idea out or this person out. And it really is dangerous.
I think there's a potential for that. I also, I've been around long enough. I remember when people were talking about Grand Theft Auto being dangerous for kids. And so I'm really hesitant to say that the games themselves are the problem. I think it's more about the way that the internet allows people with fringe views to find each other and find community with each other around a shared hobby, like video games, like sports. I mean, if you're on the internet, right, you're exposed to graphic and violent images. There is a nihilistic culture that's running really deep among young people right now who feel like they don't have a lot of power in this world. And unfortunately, it's creating situations like this.
And there are a lot of adults who may believe that they feel disenfranchised, who are sitting on social media that are traditional platforms that they're on right now, perhaps being radicalized as well. So like you said, you can't blame one section. It's not necessarily the vehicle, it's how people are using the vehicle that you have to look out for.
The shooter's still alive. The court case will be moving forward. I think we're going to learn a lot more about his motives, and I think it's a little irresponsible to try to ascribe this to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I think it's much more complicated than that, and kind of flattening down the narrative to say this guy was a left-winger really misses the whole point of what's going on with kids right now.
Well, there is a lot going on with kids right now, and in this kind of this darker area, in this area where we don't see a lot of limelight, it's important that we shed some light on it. So we thank you for helping do that here today, in earnest. Thank you so much, Malachi Barrett. We're keeping the conversation going about cooling the political rhetoric after the break. Here's a question: what you post on social media, is it causing more or less of a divide? Hold that answer. Ethan Baker and Karen Dumas join us on the show to talk about our responsibility. This is The Pulse. Back now to The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here now to talk about how we can cool the political temperature down. In Studio C, Republican Ethan Baker, the mayor of Troy, and live via Zoom, Karen Dumas of the No BS News Hour. We thank you both for joining us here tonight. I always mention this when Mayor Ethan Baker is on. It's a nonpartisan role as mayor of the city of Troy, but we have his perspective on, because you know what, Karen, for the same reason we have you on, you can have differing views and still not be disagreeable, much less hurt other people. And that's why we have the two of you on today. Karen, I'm going to begin with you. Your reaction to what you've been seeing. I know you spend a lot of time talking to people in the political and the business community, in the world, after the last few days.
I think, I have to tell you, I've been kind of disappointed and afraid at the same time, because I think that people have become so comfortable being critics and elevating themselves at someone else's expense. And I'm seeing this repeatedly, people buying into a whole division in our community and in our country. And I think it's an opportunity for people to really ask, what kind of community and what kind of country do we really want to be? I don't think this is who we are, and I don't think this is who we should strive to be.
You know, I often say, Karen and Ethan, that, or Mayor Baker, that what we see on social media is not a reflection of the entire world. It is a world that literally is based on algorithms. Mm-hmm. When you fight with somebody and the engagement levels go up, that platform can make money on it, and it continues to encourage that conversation. In the meantime, someone's posting, which, by the way, it is Ethan's birthday. Happy birthday to Ethan. It gets high engagement because they know that, they know that birthdays get engagement and yelling gets engagement. And so what do we have at the end? We have a community that we think reflects real life and the real world when it doesn't. Mayor Baker, do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%, Rube. In fact, it's not just the algorithms, it's the people themselves. I've learned in this role as mayor and on city council before, people will say the weirdest and most awful things in comments online, but they come to your face and they're totally different people. So everything is skewed altogether. And I really worry about that. I mean, we've got to do a big job here to take down the temperature throughout Metro Detroit, throughout the state and the country. And it's dependent on leaders like us at the local level, I think, to really make that change. That's
and Republicans, Democrats, and everybody in between have to have a common level of decency that they prescribe to, and that's really, really that's really, really important. Yeah. Hey, listen, Karen, I said this on the show the night of the shooting in which Charlie Kirk was killed in cold blood, simply voicing his opinion, whether you like it or not. And I said, anybody who condones this kind of a thing doesn't understand that this is an assault on every single American who has a viewpoint. Isn't that the scariest, perhaps, part of all of this, that someone can't stand up and say, this is what I believe, this is the point I want to debate, and they have to pay with their life?
Well, and unfortunately, that's nothing new in this country. But if you really think about it, everything is set up for division. You've got political parties. I mean, you think about how you board a plane. The people in first class are separated from the people in the general. Everything is about separatism. I don't think there's enough conversation about connectivity, about what we actually have in common. And I also think that, as the mayor said a few minutes ago, it's all about elevating those people who are the loudest, the people who make the loudest criticism. And we do elevate people for being critics, and people have done that. I mean, they're trying to make a name for themselves. They've made careers at doing it, and we're suffering collectively as what should be a tactful society as a result.
10%, I think it was, one analyst said 10% of the noise on Twitter at the time, 10% of the people on Twitter are causing 90% of the noise. And that sounds like the kind of echo chamber that I wouldn't want to be a part of. And so I guess the question becomes, you talk about engagement with society. Is social media, I know it's just, you can't blame social media exclusively, but is it a tool that people are using to hide and to radicalize? Mayor Baker?
Yeah, I do. I think there's benefits to social media about getting communication messages out and how you can do things. But the reality is, yeah, people are using it for the wrong reasons. And of course, the owners of the companies are using it for the wrong reasons, which you've talked about plenty of times. They're there to make money. But it's creating these back channels, these secret societies that we're, as human beings, we tend to go with like minds, right? So we find our bubble, we find our groups that make sense to us. The factions that our founding fathers warned us about so many years ago, we're living in that world. But it's so important for people to get outside those bubbles, get outside those factions, and hear from other people. Hear and see that, you know what, just because we disagree on something politically, we can get along and we can understand each other on a human level. And that is what is so desperately missing. And it's frankly missing by our politicians aren't bringing it to us. Our leaders are failing in many cases.
Malachi Barrett brought this up in the last segment a little bit about how you can't blame one particular thing, but at the same time, you have to understand what's going on in some of these rooms. Listen, he also brought up the fact that we've been talking about video games causing violent behavior since video games existed. I want to ask you, Karen, as a mother and someone who cares deeply about the young people in our community, is it an issue that these kids are stuck in echo chambers in some of these rooms and some of these chat areas in these gaming rooms?
Well, I think that it's because of the lack of connectivity that we have with each other to our young people. Too many older people are afraid of young people. They have blamed music, they have blamed movies, they have blamed games. But I blame us as a community. We talk about kids are our future, but you have people our age that are afraid of young people. They don't reach out to them. They don't look them in the eye. They don't speak to them. And I also see kids in strollers that have, cell phones or smartphones or tablets. So we are pushing each other away, and we're allowing electronics and other people to raise and have influence on our young people. And sometimes that influence isn't necessarily positive.
Mayor, I grew up in the city of Troy, and I know for a fact that that is one great diverse community. As someone who leads that city, do you believe this world is better than what we're seeing both on traditional media, on television, and on social media?
Absolutely. The people of our country and our world are far better than the snippets we see online and we see on TV. And it's incumbent on all of us to pay attention to those people and to foster that relationship. It's about the parents and the community members that need to engage these young children. We've got to stop with the screens, and we've got to get these people out of their bubbles.
Karen Dumas, we have about 20 seconds left. You always have a wise word when it comes to how we can frame things for us moving forward. How can we get better?
I want people to not generalize. I want people to not associate a behavior or an opinion to one group of people simply because it comes from one person. And I also want people to be more comfortable and confident with themselves, because when people are comfortable with themselves, they tend to be more comfortable and tolerant and accepting of others. So when we talk about getting out of the bubble, yeah, we need to get out of the bubble. We need to deal with people one-on-one, give them the opportunity, see who they are, and be okay with someone who looks, lives, loves differently than you.
The vast majority of the people in this country condemned the political violence and the shooting death of Charlie Kirk, and we certainly know that that's the truth, whether social media shows us that truth or not. Karen Dumas, great to see you. Mayor Ethan Baker, always great to see you, and a happy birthday from all of us here at The Pulse.
Thank you.
We're talking business after the break. The new jobs and economy report is out, and guess what? It's not good news. Business owner Mark Lee breaks it down for us, what we can do with that information. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. This is The Pulse. We're glad you're with us. Here to talk about the latest jobs and economic report, business owner Mark Lee. And Mark, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you.
Absolutely.
You always break it down for us so well. And from a nonpartisan view, you've said things that are positive about some of the things that are happening, and then you said the negative. You see it as it is. The job market, it is cooling right now. Give us an idea as to how much it's cooling.
It's cooling, significantly cooling. There's a new phrase that's just been coined called labor recession. labor recession, which means that the numbers, the unemployment ticked up slightly last month, but there are more people out there still looking for jobs. And so therefore, companies are hesitant about investing in people right now because they have to control their costs. And so I think in terms of me breaking it down, the economy has slowed down. The optimism is not what it should be. The realistic story is we have some headwinds ahead of us.
So the companies are being a little more cautious in the way they move forward right now. What does that mean for hiring?
It's a challenge for hiring. I mean, the bottom line is companies are, in fact, being very cautious. They have limited resources. And so the question becomes, where do we invest those dollars? Do we invest those dollars in our plants? Do we invest them in our people? For example, I was having a conversation this morning with one of my clients, and they're talking about reinvesting their resources, you ready for this, in AI. And by them investing in AI means that some of the jobs, the current jobs, might in fact be cut. So if you're looking for a job, or if you're an employer looking to hire someone, you are in a challenged situation right now.
We talked to an AI expert named Brent Yaks not long ago, and he said, it's kind of like any revolution. You have a manufacturing revolution, you have a technological revolution. In an AI revolution, do you believe that it'll be job losses, but also job gains at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a combination of both. And what you got to be careful with AI, when it first came out, everybody said, oh, my job is going to be lost. Look, you still need to have the human element. At the end of the day, technology cannot give you that human element. If you're not comfortable with AI, I recommend to people get comfortable with it. How can you use it to your ability? How can you leverage it to certainly maximize the performance of a company? Don't run away from it. Embrace it. I have embraced AI as part of my business. It's maybe that much more productive. But guess what, Roop? I still have conversations with people every single day. I have conversations like this. I look at them face to face. That's a critical part of business.
And that's what's going to keep us going, that human equity as well as
Absolutely.
working with technology. One of the things you talk about in this cooling job market are rising costs.
Yeah.
Reflect on that for a moment. How is that affecting the whole picture?
We're going to start to see the tariffs eventually going to have an impact. All right, so the companies, one of the reasons that you're seeing cautiousness right now, again, they're starting to see the cost increase, particularly the smaller businesses. The large companies have the resources in the bank, if you will, to absorb some of that cost. Small businesses don't. And they're going to get to a point very quickly whether or not they need to eat that cost or do they pass it on to the customer. The issue with the small businesses, I'm still seeing businesses are going out of business. They don't have the financial resources. So from a larger company perspective, they do have the resources.
They can take the hit.
They can take the hit, but the bottom line is the rising costs are going to continue.
And you talk to conservative economists out there, and they will tell you that eventually tariffs will benefit us because people will start building plants. I know Apple's starting to talk about that, Hyundai and others. So we'll have to watch this one really carefully.
But keep in mind, that's long term. That's not going to happen overnight.
No, not now.
It's not going to happen now. You're looking down the road.
Yeah. Well, this is an important conversation, one that begins at this desk and will continue at dinner tables across Metro Detroit. I want to thank you for your time, Mark Lee, as usual. Thanks for joining us. And that is the Pulse for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was great to be with you.